Our hero, who is obsessed with games and no one likes him, suddenly finds himself in a real zombie world. But his experience in games makes him the only one who knows how to survive amidst the chaos and horror. He begins to use his skills to turn the tables and prove that being an outcast gamer is the key to survival. On a very normal, very average day, Kota picks up his handheld gaming device and loads up his new obsession, a popular MMORPG zombie game. The minute his character loads into a medieval zombie setting, Kota finds himself staring at multiple zombies attacking different parts of the city, terrorizing people, and wreaking havoc at every turn, all while being led around by a giant hunk of rotting zombie flesh. Kota identifies as the boss. In the first few moments upon his arrival, Kota wastes some seconds of his time killing off small fries and saving NPCs that are just pixels on his screen. Thereafter, he gets up to a high vantage point, lights up 2 Molotov cocktails, hurls them at the zombie boss's head while lunging toward it, and slams his weird weapon into the zombie boss's mouth, killing it in the process. Soon after killing the zombie boss, a message box window pops up in front of Kota's character, congratulating him for clearing the S-rated ultra-hard mode game boss and raising his evaluation, ranking to the 2nd best player in the entire world. Despite having achieved such remarkable success in the game, Kota's character frowns and returns to the real world in no time. Once he's back in the real world, Kota, who's currently in a lecture theater lazing around after a boring lecture, blames himself for fighting small fries and trying to save NPCs, which ended up costing him 30 seconds more than the required time to get to first place. However, just as he's about to try his luck one more time, his childhood friend, a beautiful lady named Ayaka, taps his back and asks if he's playing games again. Although shocked at first, when he realizes that the person tapping his back was Ayaka, Kota sighs and tells her to leave him alone, because he's busy. Unable to do that, Ayaka politely confronts him for being rude to his precious childhood friend. But then Kota, while checking out 3 dudes chit-chatting with one of them holding a bat at the back, tells her that the term is just ancient history. Before long, Ayaka's friends, who are also all girls, spot her talking to the loser and invite her to move with them to the next classroom. After assuring them that she's going to join them, Ayaka asks if Kota could also tag along with them. Around that same time, one of Kota's worst bullies, a red-headed unidentified schmuck, approaches Ayaka and Kota and asks the beautiful lady why she's volunteering with the bottom-tier loser. Irritated by his description of her friend, Ayaka calls him out for referring to Kota like that, calling his words cruel, but the redhead tells her that since Kota's a guy who wastes time playing stupid games in college, then he's sure that bro's definitely going to be a life failure who won't amount to anything. When Kota notices Ayaka's friends doubling down on what his bully had just said, he turns to Ayaka, lets her know that he doesn't really care what they think of him, and then urges her to just go with her friends. As soon as she turns her back to leave, the redhead puts his arm around Kota, tells him he's also gunning for Ayaka's heart, and then leaves with his buddies after saying more demeaning things to poor Kota. Thereafter, Kota complains about the annoying people he has to deal with daily, but soon stops yapping when he spots a blinding light emanating from the middle of the city on the horizon. At first, Kota dismisses the weird light as some sort of government project, but not too long after it appears, it spreads outwards to engulf the entire city. In a matter of seconds, the emergency sirens all over Kota's college go off as the light reaches the college building, and the entire school is sent into a dangerous blackout. By this time, several students wonder what that loud noise they just heard seconds ago might be, while other nonchalant ones urge everyone to calm down till things eventually return to normal. Kota, on the other hand, knows something's seriously wrong, so he tells his colleagues that something's wrong, but the red-headed bully teases him for being scared and cowardly, and passes everything off as some art class prop stuff. Just a second later, an explosion occurs behind the redhead bully, and before long, a humanoid zombie slowly walks in erratically, trying to figure out its next victims. Although everyone knows that the monster's a clear zombie, the delusional ones still refuse to believe that the zombie's real, because they all think that the scenario is just a super realistic film club shooting. At one point in the encounter, an idiot picks up his phone, moves close to the zombie, and tries to take a selfie with it so he can post it on social media. However, to his dismay, the moment he gets too close, the zombie bites off half of his left arm and pins him to the ground. As the guy screams his lungs out, the others quickly realize that this zombie means business, but at that time, they did nothing but watch the hungry zombie tear this brainless oaf apart like a slab of meat. Shortly after processing the horrific scene, the other students scramble for dear life as they try to figure out where they can run. When Kota realizes that the entire school is infested with those pesky zombies, he pauses for a moment and thinks about everything that's happened so far: lights enveloping the city, siren sounds, and the zombies in question. At this point, he realizes that the development is exactly the same as the opening scenario in his zombie game. As he continues running, his in real life status screen opens up and welcomes him to the zombie world. However, this time around, the difficulty level of the scenario is set to 0, and his inventory is empty. While he's not sure if whatever he's seeing is real or not, Kota knows that if he doesn't do something to these zombies as quickly as possible, then everyone in that spot will be devoured without exception. So, while the other trapped students continue searching for a safe place to evacuate to, Kota, after taking another look at his empty inventory, figures that if this new reality is real, then he's powerless against these zombies with his bare hands. As such, to avoid dying, he carefully considers using tools skillfully, just like he did in the game, and instantly searches his surroundings for a sharp object he can arm himself with. By that time, a zombie breaks through their classroom door and charges at one idiotic student to eat him. Luckily for the student, before the zombie can eat his arse, Kota pushes the zombie away from the student with a chair, and tells his colleagues to barricade the door with all the chairs they can find. At first, the idiots stare at him like fools, but when Kota lets them know what happens if they don't listen to him, their last brain cell gets activated, and they all get down to barricading the entrance door. Soon after, Kota pushes the annoying zombie out of the window, along with the chair, and heaves a sigh of relief when he spots the door being barricaded. While he catches his breath, Kota's other negative IQ colleagues desperately wave their phones around the room to search for a good phone signal they can connect to, so they can call emergency services. Along the line, they chat amongst themselves, asking each other if these monsters are zombies, and while they're at it, Kota, who's currently staring out the window, slowly realizes just how cooked they all are. For starters, he suspects that they're almost definitely in another world inside the zombie game, but this time around, those who get eaten will really die in real life. Also, while it may look safe to be holed up inside that spot for a couple of weeks, Kota knows that the food they have won't even last them a day, and this brings him to the next inevitable decision they all have to make: go outside to search for food and answers. Before getting to that, Kota finds a mop nearby, breaks the stick, and creates a makeshift weapon he can defend himself with for now. However, just as he's about to leave the classroom, the red-headed fool from earlier asks him to explain where he's going on his own, after which he suggests that he wait with them till rescue comes. At this point, Kota pauses and tells the bozo, alongside every other student in the class with him, that rescue probably won't be coming for them at all. Hearing this, the redhead dude, who straight up refuses to listen to reason, confronts Kota, the loner, for suddenly trying to take charge, but then Kota turns and lets him know that there's a high likelihood that they've all been transported along with the entire university to another world overflowing with zombies. Although confused, the entire class listens in silence as Kota continues to explain how the buildings that should have been visible outside have completely disappeared, as well as how the phones don't work either. Shortly after yapping about moving quickly to a safe room to avoid dying, citing that there should be several safe locations within the university grounds, Kota asks the students if any one of them would like to tag along with him so they can figure this out together. Unfortunately for him, after a brief silence, the entire classroom erupts in laughter because, apparently, nobody believes a word he just said. After getting himself a good laugh, the red-headed fool permits Kota, whom he calls Game Brain, to go die by himself if he so badly wants to die. By this time, Kota bids them farewell, opens the entrance door, and slowly creeps into the quiet corridor to begin his exploration. While outside, he spots docile zombies standing all over the corridor and silently reminds himself to go to that place to confirm if they're really in the game world. Just then, Ayaka slips out of the entrance door, holding a broken mop stick, and complains about how many zombies are in the corridor. When Kota asks her what she's doing there, she tells him that she's coming with him because she's worried about him being alone. Before he can even respond, Kota's second childhood friend, Ryoma, aka the blonde guy holding a baseball bat earlier, also busts out of the classroom and tells Kota that he's only tagging along because he wants to protect Ayaka, not that he's worried about Kota in any way. By that time, Ayaka notices the rivalry between the boys, and she asks Ryoma why he's being so hostile to Kota, with whom he used to get along pretty well back in the day. With not much time to talk, Kota urges his peers to keep their mouths shut so they can carefully sneak out of the university building, making less noise, to avoid waking the docile zombies. Not too long after they begin tiptoeing, Ayaka steps on some broken glass, which makes the noise that awakens the zombies, and in less than a minute, a zombie lunges at Ayaka to eat her up. To protect her, Ryoma slams his baseball bat into the attacking zombie's shoulder, crushing its bones in the process, and leaves it to die in pain. However, to his dismay, the zombie gets back up, grabs the bat, and begins attacking Ryoma instead. Thankfully, before poor Ryoma gets eaten up, Kota swoops in after telling Ryoma and Ayaka to duck and stabs the zombie in the head to kill it. Along the line, Kota gets to experience the real feeling of crushing a zombie's brain and is terrified by it. Nonetheless, after killing off the zombie, he advises his colleagues to aim for the zombie's weak point, which is the head, next time, and Ryoma then asks him if everything he said earlier about the zombie world being their reality is true. As they continue making their way out of the school building, Kota claims not to have enough confirmation yet, but still urges his buddies to hurry up so he can quickly check if that thing exists. If, peradventure, the totem he's searching for exists, then Kota's worst fears will be confirmed, and that'll be bad for humanity as a whole. However, for now, he sticks to surviving the deadly streets of the zombie-infested city alongside Ryoma and Ayaka, and keeps running till they all eventually make it out of the school premises. Upon reaching the ruined city of their new reality, Ryoma asks Kota, after running for a few more minutes, if they've finally shaken the monsters off, and Kota tells him that they have. Soon after, Ayaka, who's been looking around the dilapidated city since they arrived, finally asks Kota if he knows what the hell happened to the city, but then Kota lets her know that he's never been to that city before. Some moments later, after running for a few more seconds, Kota and Ko finally arrive at a station none of them can recognize. Before getting inside, however, Ryoma urges Kota to explain what's happening, and he assures them that everything will become clearer if they can get down there. Shortly after exploring the station for a few minutes, Kota and his peers finally arrive in a room housing the floating totem he's been looking for. As Ayaka and Ryoma stare at the unbelievably large green chess piece looking glowing thing, wondering why the totem is in a place like that, Kota, on the other hand, is busy yapping about how incredible and beautifully detailed the totem is. Seconds later, he extends his hand to touch it, and when Ayaka tries to stop him, Ryoma pulls her back because he feels that the totem's dangerous. Eventually, Kota takes the gamble and touches the totem with courage. Almost instantly, he feels a sudden rush of power coursing through his veins, and, soon enough, red electricity begins crackling all around his body. As soon as his transformation is complete, Kota gets registered as a game player and unlocks his initial skills as a beginner. Before long, his inventory gets stocked with his initial equipment, making Kota understand just how useful a player awakening really is, and so he chills out for half a minute to understand his new self. Once he's done accepting his new self, Kota turns to his buddies so he can explain the situation to them, but before he's even able to utter any useful statements, the zombies, chasing them earlier, show up at the barricaded door of the subway station, and soon gain access to the totem room. Around this same time, Kota knows that there's no escape route for them, judging by the sheer number of zombies present. However, since he's the only one who's awakened and can protect both his friends, he steps forward, opens his inventory, checks out his initial equipment, which turns out to be a sword, and grabs what he calls his specialty of specialties weapon. By the time the zombie monsters charge toward him, Kota skillfully dissects a huge bunch of them in one fell swoop and continues attacking every single zombie charging at him, all while learning and understanding how to move and defeat them effectively. In no time at all, Kota masters the sword art and kills off several zombies at a go. At one point in his fight against the zombies, however, Bro gets complacent and distracted. Thankfully, before a bunch of other zombies attached to the ceiling attack him, Ryoma screams at him and lets him know that there are zombies attached to the ceiling. With no time to waste, Kota checks his skill list to see if there's an available skill for him to take them all out at once. The moment he spots the double slash skill, Kota activates it and uses it to kill off all the ceiling zombies in record time. In the aftermath of the fight, Kota breathes heavily, unable to believe he just killed off a bunch of zombies, and eventually gets the confirmation he needs to conclude that the world they're trapped in isn't a dream or a reality show. If anything, it's something else. Not too long after, Ryoma asks Kota about the sword skills and the fight that happened just now, seeing as Kota was lazy and useless before, but then Kota tells them to calm down first, because he's just as confused as both of them. Now that everything's clear and vivid to him, he does tell his colleagues that the world they're currently trapped in isn't the real world, like he initially thought. Rather, the world they're in is the escape of the zombie world, a zombie survival game, commonly known as EOZ's world. Considering everything he's learned so far, Kota tells his colleagues that they've all been transported, along with their university, into the game world and have also been chosen as its survivalist players. Having heard all of Kota's explanation, Ryoma, who refuses to believe such a ridiculous story, asks Kota for proof that everything he's said is true. But to explain to them, Kota tells them to hold out their hands and chant the words, status, open. Although skeptical at first, Ayaka and Ryoma obey his instructions anyway. and to their surprise, they each get status screens, just like Koda's, which shocks Ryoma to the core. As they both fiddle with their status screens, Koda moves on to explain the nature of the actual game screen to them. To properly pass his message across, he takes out his handheld gaming device and compares the status screen on the EAZ game application to all their in real-life status screens, just so they can see for themselves that their status screens are very similar to the game's. Soon after seeing all the proof he needs, Ryoma calls his situation a miraculous coincidence and then blames Koda, who literally almost died saving his stupid arse, for causing all this in the first place. Though irritated by Ryoma's negative IQ thinking, Koda keeps calm and helps the fool understand that he's in no way connected to the game world. That being said, Ayaka asks Koda to explain the true nature of the game to them, and he tells her that it's a game that requires them to escape from a city full of zombies, after clearing all the main quests in one piece. Additionally, to start the main quest, Koda tells both his friends that they need to touch the totem and register as a player, just like he did earlier. But before getting to that, Ayaka gets cold feet and asks Koda if they're really going to have to fight those monsters with weapons, while Koda assures her that there's no other way to go around it, citing that he's aiming to push forward and escape the city to clear the game. Ryoma, aka Captain Save-A-Ho, senses Ayaka's hesitation and decides to touch it all by himself to become strong like Koda so he can get Ayaka, his pride and joy, back home safely. Thankfully, before letting the narcissist get his way, Ayaka, who refuses to die in a pathetic place like that city, grows a pair and decides to touch the totem. With the stage set, Ryoma and Ayaka touch the totem simultaneously. While Ryoma suddenly gets a massive overflow of power, Ayaka loses her expensive coat, and both undergo transformations that change their physical abilities massively. Right after watching them transform, Ayaka gets a new pink jacket, which Koda describes as a marginally better initial equipment that's more durable and reliable than regular clothes, and quickly forgets her former expensive jacket. With their transformations over, Koda urges both of them to check their initial status and equip their weapons, and Ryoma, upon opening his inventory, gets disappointed when he realizes that his initial weapon is a baseball bat. As for Ayaka, she gets a pink glowing bow and an infinite ammo supply. And Koda, having seen just how efficient the game world is for giving them weapons suited to their play style, considering their talents, figures that they're good to go. Moments later, the trio sneaks back out of the station and heads toward the starting point of the first quest. On their way there, Koda educates the other two on how to navigate the next destination using the current in-game map available from their status screens. But, before long, they approach a horde and duck out of sight when they realize that the zombies aren't displayed on the map, unlike back in the game. A few minutes later, as they try to sneak around carefully, Ryoma gets a surprise attack by zombies from behind. But luckily for him, before one of the zombies can bite him, he quickly summons his baseball bat and hits the zombie in the jaw. Right after doing that, he delivers the final blow by slamming the bat a second time on the zombie and cutting its head off, all in one fell swoop. Upon realizing the extent of his power, the fool starts acting boastfully and capably, not realizing that there are other zombies behind him, just waiting for their chance to eat him up. When one of the other zombies eventually latches onto his back, locking his arms and bat in place, Ryoma figures out just how cooked he is if he doesn't act fast. Fortunately for the dumbass, Ayaka shoots the zombie in the eye, saving Ryoma in the process, and feels proud of herself for finally saving one of her colleagues. Soon after getting back on his feet, Ryoma gets ready for round 2, and exchanges words of encouragement with Ayaka just so they can finish off the zombies as soon as possible. As they're about to attack, Koda calls and tells them to pause a little bit so he can finish explaining the risks and limitations of their powers. However, before he passes his message across, Ryoma and Ayaka move on to kill off as many zombies as they possibly can in a short amount of time. Not too long after they begin their killing spree, Ryoma's strength gets depleted drastically, rendering him immobile and unable to move, and Ayaka soon follows. As the duo looks up to Koda for an explanation, Koda calmly urges them to listen to his explanation to the end before going all over the place, and they give him their undivided attention. About their current situation, Koda calls it a stamina-depleted state, and explains that players who become stronger through awakening often pay a price. Although it's a given that stamina is required for all actions, the minute their stamina runs out, they won't be able to handle weapons or even run. As such, to conserve mana, Koda tells them to avoid combat as much as possible and proceed with stealth, making sure they only fight when they have no other choice. Upon hearing Koda's explanation, Ryoma complains that stealth isn't his strong suit, but Koda lets him know that he'll become zombie food if he doesn't endure it. To help them understand how dire their situation is, he reminds them of the guy who was brutally killed in the classroom by a zombie during the early stages of the Isekai event, and then adds that while it was possible to revive over and over again if they died in the game, in this reality, however, if they die, then that's the end. By this time, Ayaka apologizes for being stupid earlier, and then makes a promise with Ryoma to always follow his instructions henceforth. That being said, Kota and his buddies continue moving toward the first quest. Upon walking for a few more minutes, however, Kota notices something that makes his entire body cringe in fear. And Ayaka, who notices him reacting to something, asks if there's something wrong all of a sudden. With no time to explain, Kota urges them to hurry, and as they run toward the first quest, Kota mutters to himself without the other two finding out, almost as if there was something scary coming their way. Soon after running around the city for one more hour, Ryoma asks Kota, while they cross over a zombie horde on a narrow, banner-like metal bridge, why they have to go through such an extreme route to get to the main quest's location. And Kota, upon ignoring the question, instead hurries the other two up because the narrow route is the shortest one they have yet. As they climb the other side of the pathway, Ayaka asks Kota why he seems to be in such a hurry, and he tells her it's because they need to clear the quest before nightfall. Confused, Ayaka asks again to know what happens when night comes, but Kota sidesteps the question as usual as they arrive at the destination for the first quest, and begins explaining the conditions needed to pass the first quest before nightfall. For starters, Kota shows his colleagues the electromagnetic wave generator switch on the other side of the scaffolding they're on, and explains that they have to activate the device with that switch so that it can wipe out all the zombies inside the building in one attack before the main quest can be cleared. Before long, Ryoma asks him how he plans on getting to the other side, seeing as neither of them has enough stamina to make it through while fighting the zombies. And Kota tells him that he and Ayaka will distract the zombies with a loud noise as they protect themselves on a scaffolding up front, while he, on the other hand, will climb and slide down a crane in the opposite side to get to the switch in no time. Hearing this, Ayaka tries letting him know just how dangerous that sounds, but Kota assures her that he's cleared that level too many times to make a mistake now. Upon stopping her from discouraging Kota again, Ryoma turns to his frenemy and warns him to ensure he succeeds in this first main quest. Once the stage is set, and all three are in agreement over their roles in this quest, Kota starts a countdown to begin the quest. The moment he gives the other two the go-ahead to begin their attempt at the quest, Ryoma and Ayaka instantly get on top of the scaffolding they saw earlier and make several loud noises to attract all the docile zombies in the vicinity. As soon as the dumb zombies take the bait, Ayaka gives Kota the signal to get going, and so Kota, after begging his guys not to kill themselves, begins his run for the switch. Unfortunately for him, when he gets on top of the crane, he spots a few zombies already waiting to welcome him to their dinner table. But then Kota, who knows that he doesn't have time to deal with them, dodges all their attacks at once and jumps for the crane's hook. When he finally catches and latches onto the hook, Kota swings it to and fro a few times to propel the hook forward. However, just as he's about to jump to the other side, he spots 3 zombies at his landing point, roaming around, and ultimately ends up jumping anyway, hoping to handle them without any hassle. Just as he's about to land, however, he summons his sword from his inventory and skillfully takes out 2 of them before sticking to a rough landing, losing his weapon in the process. Luckily for him, just as the final zombie is about to bite his head off, Ayaka's pink arrow hits it in the head and kills it instantly, and Kota, having realized what she just did, thanks her for saving him. Not too long after, Ryoma lets him know that he can't hold on much longer, meaning he needs to hurry, and Kota instantly continues heading toward the switch after asking his buddy for a little more time. As he runs the rest of the journey to the switch, Kota navigates his way through the stragglers, hanging around that spot, jumps as high as he can above all of them, and ultimately ends up pulling the switch just milliseconds before all the zombies there touch him. In the blink of an eye, the fail-safe device in the building gets activated, and before long, the entire horde of zombies trapped inside that building is vaporized into thin air by a blinding light. In the aftermath of the final strike, Ayaka asks Ryoma, with Kota absent, if the zombies' disappearance means that they've succeeded at completing the first strike, but then Ryoma, while ignoring her question, asks if she knows where Kota is. Just when they begin thinking that poor bro was crushed underneath the debris, Kota walks out of a pile of debris and urges his buddies not to kill him off on their own. While the other 2 welcome him back to the real world, Kota yaps about how he failed the landing, which he called dangerous, and then listens to Ryoma scold him for being scrawny from playing too many games. As the boys chill out, like boys normally do, Ayaka interrupts and asks Kota to explain what happens now that they've cleared the quest. In response, Kota tells her that they're safe for now because they were able to clear the quest before nightfall. Around this same time, Ayaka asks Kota again why he's so afraid of the night, almost as if something dangerous is to happen when it gets dark. But before Kota explains the scenario to her, the trio all hear human screams from a distance and rush over to the railing to check out what's happening outside. The moment Ryoma looks over the railing, peeping into the outside streets, what he sees there shocks the poor guy to the core. As it turns out, Ryoma, Kota, and Ayaka all saw a young dude like them get chased around the street by what seems to be a stronger and much faster zombie. Right after watching the weird, beast-like zombie monster loom over and rip the poor guy apart, a very terrified Ryoma asks Kota why the zombie they just saw was different from the other slow-walking zombies, and Kota says it's because zombies become more ferocious at night, making their speed and power completely on a different level compared to the day. By this time, Ayaka, who now understands why Kota was so afraid of the night earlier, asks Kota if the monsters will still attack them, but Kota assures her that they can't attack them because he's acquired a safe room key from the quest they just finished. Seconds later, he takes out the key card, shows the other two, and continues explaining that the key leads to a place where they can spend that dangerous night in absolute safety, with enough food and water to survive all through the night. Having said all that, Kota and his buddies make their way to the safe room and spend the rest of the night there without any zombie disturbance. The following morning, Ayaka wakes up in a revealing pajama outfit and walks down to the dining room, yawning and stretching as much as possible to wake the rest of her slender body up. When he spots her, Ryoma greets her warmly, asking if she slept well, and Ayaka reveals that while she was scared of a zombie attack, she eventually fell asleep on the fluffy, soft bed. Moments later, when she joins the boys for breakfast, Ryoma compliments the state of the safe room, calling the food, water, and even electricity amazing, and Ayaka suggests that they all just hide in there forever since it's like a shelter. Although Kota admits to liking that idea, he does let the other two know that the food in the room is very limited. So, while they're at it, he advises that they use the safe room as their base for leveling up, meaning they have to get properly equipped and then proceed to the next quest as soon as possible. Put simply, the trio will act during the day when the zombies are weak, and then survive the dangerous nights in the safe room. However, to survive well on that plan, Kota says they must never lose the key card to the safe room, or else they'll be locked out of this luxury forever. That being said, Kota and his buddies gear up and continue exploring the surroundings once they're done with breakfast, before embarking on their next destination. However, Ryoma asks Kota to explain where they're headed first, but just as Kota's about to explain, he notices movement nearby and quickly hides himself and his buddies in a nearby corner. Once the movements get much closer to them, the trio arm themselves and proceed to attack the culprits, thinking they were zombies. However, just as Kota's about to take one of the culprits' heads off, a voice screams out and begs him to wait first, claiming that they're not zombies. And Kota, after pausing in his tracks, finally recognizes the ones they thought to be culprits to be the wounded classmates they left back at the university grounds. After all the niceties, he asks them to explain what and why they have such terrible wounds on all their bodies. But before they're able to respond, Ayaka calls and urges both Kota and Ryoma to get all of them to the safe room for now. As they're about to leave for the safe room, the redhead Kota hater from before, now known as Hayato, calls everyone to wait, and then asks Kota how a weakling like him survived in this ruined world for so long. Thankfully, Ryoma intervenes before both Nimrods start fighting and advises that they get to a safe place first before they sort themselves out. When they eventually get to the safe room, one of the classmates narrates everything they've had to face on the university grounds up until that point, and also adds that the university campus has been overrun with zombies. As the girls amongst them tear up, they yap about how confused and lost they were throughout the previous day, running all around and oblivious to everything that's happened to everyone else, all while burying their heads in Ayaka's arms. Once they finish their yap, two others turn to Kota and ask him what he and the other two have been doing so far, as well as how they even found a room like that in the debris. When Ayaka reveals that Kota found the place, the disgusting bully, Hayato, turns to Ayaka and confronts her and Kota for having it easy when they all went through hell to get there. Once Ayaka tries to clarify her response earlier, Kota intervenes and explains everything they've been doing so far to Hayato. Even after explaining how they awakened and cleared quests to obtain the key to the safe room, Hayato still refuses to believe the ridiculous story, as he asks for the basis for such a weird story. Around this time, Kota draws his sword from his inventory, showcases it to the hapless fool, and tells both him and everyone else, asking where he got such a dangerous thing from, that the sword is the weapon that was given to him through the player registration system. Not too long after, Ayaka and Ryoma both showcase their bow and bats, respectively, all just to prove to the others that Kota's telling the truth. Soon after acting all cool and unhinged by their special weapon, Ayaka suggests that they all take the rest of the students to the subway station totem, so they can all get weapons upon their awakening. Hearing this, Kota starts a minute-long yap about survival rate, teamwork, and other benefits of getting registered altogether. By this time, the other students, who used to think Kota was just a gloomy game otaku, suddenly realize just how cool and awesome his leadership is. With this, they all choose to believe in Kota and glaze the sheepish MC a little bit, while Kota's all flattered to finally be recognized. Behind the scenes, Hayato and his other bastards refuse to accept Kota's leadership, as they all think that he's still a bottom-tier otaku who's getting all cocky. Moments later, as Kota gears up to take the students to the subway station to get awakened. While it's still bright, he reminds everyone not to forget the location of the safe room, because it's their lifeline to surviving in this zombie-infested world. Around this time, Hayato asks if Kota is insinuating that whoever has the safety room key card is the most important, but just as Kota is about to answer him, Hayato punches him to the ground, grabs the key card from his pocket, and informs everyone that he's going to be the new leader of their small group. Although confused by Hayato's stupidity, Ryoma gives the bastard a chance to return the key card. But then, Hayato threatens to smash Kota's brains out if Ryoma doesn't shut the hell up. And so Ryoma continues murmuring. To avoid any more fighting, Kota, who's just catching his breath, surrenders the safe room to Hayato, so he can do what he wants with it, and Hayato praises him, a loner, for doing the right thing. When the other students try to talk some sense into the narcissistic bastard, Hayato lets them know that he won't let anyone who opposes him into the safe room. At this point, the others just shut the freak up and conclude that they're going to follow Hayato till the end. As for Kota and his friends, Hayato pushes them out of the safe room and taunts Ayaka to stay behind if she can before slamming the door shut on 3 of them. Shortly after getting thrown out, Ryoma helps Kota up and asks him why he's willingly giving Hayato the safe room they risked their lives for. Although Kota admits that he's frustrated, he does remind Ryoma that it's absolutely pointless to fight with classmates, aka their fellow humans, when the real enemies are the zombies. That being said, the trio continues strolling the streets to search for another safe room they can chill out in, and spend the next few hours doing so. Somewhere along the way, Ayaka asks Kota for a solution to their safe room problem, knowing fully well that it's impossible to survive those monsters without a safe room, and Kota tells her that the fastest solution is to get a new safe room. At that point, Ryoma suggests they challenge the next quest, but with their current level, Kota tells Ryoma that clearing the second quest will be very difficult because there are several times more zombies waiting for them than in the first quest. Before giving up hope, however, Kota gets a better idea to skip the quest completion order and head to the craft machine first for weapon upgrades, but then he gets a little skeptical about putting Ayaka and Ryoma in danger because it's a forceful method. Even when Ryoma and Ayaka excitedly encourage him to lead them there, Kota lets them know that the area isn't a place they can challenge with their current level, and so he urges them to forget about it because it's too dangerous. Around this time, Ryoma clocks Kota's worrisome attitude and teases him for being considerate of himself and Ayaka. For the next few seconds, they say all the right things to Kota, who's scared of putting both of them in more danger, and ultimately manage to convince him to let them take the challenge. Once Kota's convinced, he thanks them for standing by his side and takes them to the craft machine location. About an hour later, Kota and his buddies get to the craft machine location and approach the huge yellow rectangular box carefully. Before long, Ryoma asks Kota why this whole side quest thingy seems so easy, seeing as they haven't found any zombies in sight so far. But to make him understand why, Kota begins by explaining what the craft machine does to enhance their weapons. If the mechanics of this weapon upgrade are like the game, then the moment they set a weapon in the machine, about 10 zombies appear around them, while they're weaponless, because their weapons are being enhanced at the moment, and they'll have to face them all barehanded. Supposing Kota's the only one there, then he'd have been killed instantly, given his current level. But now that he's there with comrades he can trust, Kota insinuates that Ayaka and Ryoma can hold off all the zombies with their weapons, at least until Kota's sword gets enhanced. By this time, Ayaka and Ryoma realize their role in this quest, and so they promise to help Kota to the best of their abilities by protecting him while his weapon is being enhanced. That being said, Kota double checks with them to be sure they're okay with whatever happens, and once Ryoma assures him that they're ready to help, he begs them not to overdo their role and then proceeds to place his sword inside the craft machine. The moment the weapon enhancement begins, a bunch of zombies with numbers reaching as high as 20 to 30 zombies all appear and surround the kids in an instant. At that point, Ryoma and Ayaka get scared for their lives, seeing as the zombies clearly are more than 10. But just as Kota's about to abort the mission, due to the absurdity of the whole scenario, Ryoma and Ayaka urge him to stick to the plan first and think about consequences later. Once Kota agrees to stand back and wait till his weapon's fully upgraded, Ayaka and Ryoma get right to work. hitting, smashing, piercing, and stabbing as many zombies as they can in a short period with their weapons. At one point in their zombie brawl, Ryoma gets himself in a pinch and calls Ayaka for support. As Ayaka works on supporting him from the rear, Kota anxiously waits for his sword to be upgraded, as his precious childhood friends wait for him to be finished. Just as the weapon enhancement procedure is complete, Ryoma and Ayaka get overwhelmed by the numerous zombies attacking them. To protect Ayaka, Ryoma grabs 2 wooden slabs while giving her a chance to escape, and then covers himself with the slabs to buy himself a little more time. Unfortunately for him, though, the zombies all cluster around and cover him till he's no longer visible, leaving Ryoma with no other option but to accept his fate and die a hero since he's already reached his limit. Just then, as Ryoma's about to get bitten, Kota kills off all the zombies with his upgraded sword, shocking Ryoma in the process, and then teases Ryoma for always wanting to shoulder everything alone. Soon after clearing the zombies, Kota apologizes to his buddies for keeping them waiting, and gets ready for his counterattack, before poor bro begins his attack. However, Ryoma and Ayaka rush toward him and ask him some things about his enhanced weapon. After letting them know that he got the weapon, all thanks to them, Kota urges them both to leave the zombies to him and then lunges at the enemy with his enhanced sword. In his first attack, Kota slices multiple zombies, all at once, with an insane power that he senses is beyond the game. As more ordinary zombies approach, the overjoyed gamer, Kota smiles and gives his friends the show of the century, slashing, beheading, and dismembering as many zombies as he can. At this point, both Ryoma and Ayaka get to see how mighty enhanced weapons are. So, once Kota's done taking down the most threatening enemies, Ayaka and Ryoma rush toward the craft machine and enhance their weapons as well in preparation for the second quest. About an hour later, the trio arrives at the creepy-looking location, which appears to be a ruined toy mall, to try out the second quest and earn another safe room before nightfall. As they stroll inside the toy mall filled with very eerie, very creepy plushies, mannequins, and dolls, Ayaka comments on how creepier than usual the stage for the second quest really looks. With less than an hour until sunset, Kota reminds his buddies that they must clear the place and get to the safe room in less than an hour. Hearing this, Ryoma takes out his enhanced baseball bat and suggests to the other two that they force their way through the second stage with their enhanced weapon. Before getting to that, however, Kota stops and lets him know that the second stage is riddled with traps that could kill them if they're not careful. Upon listening to Ryoma complain about the absurdity of keeping traps in such a location, Kota climbs down the platform therein to confirm the safety of the pathway and urges Ayaka and Ryoma to follow behind once he gives the signal, while he clears the dangerous killer lasers meticulously placed on the ground beneath them. Ayaka asks Kota if he's okay clearing the traps by himself, and he assures her that since he's cleared and memorized the trap locations many times in the game, he should be fine. Besides, given the fact that his buddies are already at their physical limits because of their earlier battle with the zombies, Kota feels like he owes it to them to protect them anyway he can. That being said, Bro arms himself and continues tiptoeing all over the space up front to avoid stepping on any floor traps and mines. As the other two follow behind him, Ryoma gets bored and swings his bat around. When Ayaka urges him to stop the nonsense he's doing, Ryoma yaps a bit about doing stealth while being cautious, unleashes the hidden new feature of his enhanced weapon, and continues swinging it around a bit more vigorously, hoping he can use the badass new weapon soon on zombies. The moment Kota catches him, letting his guard down like a Nimrod, he tries to call the fool to his senses, but unfortunately, before Ryoma can make sense of what Kota's saying, he steps on a trap, activating it, and releases the hidden wall zombie clowns on himself. In the blink of an eye, the idiot gets surrounded and captured by these clown zombies, and instantly realizes that this is the trap Kota's been talking about all along. Luckily for him, Kota swoops in and kills off all the zombies, wrapping themselves around Ryoma before they get the chance to bite him. By the time other creepy zombies rush in to join the show, Kota lunges at them with a thunderous roar and finishes all of them like clockwork. In the aftermath of the attack, Ayaka scolds Kota for being a little reckless, and then talks some sense into Ryoma's head to try to make him apologize to Kota. When he eventually apologizes, Kota, who's busy catching his breath, urges the dumbass to save his apology because they're almost at the goal. With that, Kota prepares himself to activate the switch and clear the second quest before it's too late, since they've already broken through the trap hell. Just as he's about to begin the final parts of the quest, Ryoma moves forward carelessly again and steps on yet another trap, like a fool. As the trio gets even more trapped on that floor, Ayaka loses her shit and calls Ryoma an idiot for messing up again. Even still, Kota calls the situation a strange one because he knows they've already passed the trap area, and that there shouldn't be a trap like that at all. Not too long after activating the second trap, something fires a huge beam of energy at Ryoma to kill him in a jiffy. Luckily for him, before the beam hits him, Kota spots it and pushes him out of the way before he gets fried. Soon after saving his buddy, the trio spot a giant, creepy zombie looming over them. And Kota, who's just as shocked as the other two, wonders why such a difficult boss is appearing in a place like that. While he stands there, searching for non-existent answers to his recent question, Ayaka, on the other hand, notices the huge zombie monster and comments on its terrifying size. As for Ryoma, who feels defeating the monster is his responsibility for stepping on the trap, he lunges at the monster, ignoring Kota's warnings not to attack it yet, and swings his fancy new enhanced bat, now equipped with flames, to attack the terrifying zombie monster. The moment he gets too close for comfort, the monster not only defends against the idiot's puny attacks, but it also slaps the shit out of the bastard and sends him crashing down around his unhinged buddies. Thankfully, just seconds later, Ryoma gets back on his feet, angry and irritated at the bastard, who broke his enhanced weapon with just one hand, but then Kota explains to him that the bastard is a power-specialized enhanced mid-boss zombie, aka Hammer Crusher. Moving on, he explains how strange it is for such a boss to suddenly appear at this point in the real-life game world, when, back in the game, it's usually impossible for it to show up this early. To survive the attack, however, Kota urges his peers to forget defeating it because, at their current level, they'd be killed instantly. By this time, Ryoma asks if they're to retreat, and Kota reminds both of them that there's currently no escape route because the path they came from was blocked when the thing appeared. In other words, the only way out of there is the door that the monster's blocking. As such, to safely get out of that space, the three of them will attack the monster with full force and hopefully wear down its health over time. Since he's the fastest, Kota chooses to draw the monster's attention, while Ayaka stops its movement with her specialty arrows, and Ryoma delivers a powerful blow to crush it in one fell swoop. Right after explaining the plan to his peers, Kota gets right down to work, dodging, deflecting, and evading as many attacks from the giant as possible, all while taunting and drawing its full attention on him alone by insulting the monster. By the time the monster gets super pissed, it unleashes its claws and uses the lasers to try and cut Kota to itsy-bitty pieces, but, to its dismay, Kota dodges the attack and hurries up to figure out how he can create a chance to attack. Just as the monster's about to exploit another opening from Kota's side, Ayaka swoops in and shoots several wind attribute enhanced arrows at the monster, all of which end up transforming into some sticky substance that holds the giant zombie monster down. Soon after holding the monster down, she gives Kota and Ryoma the signal to hit the monster with everything they've got. Unfortunately, as the boys hit the monster with their strongest attacks, it disappears for a second, reappears above them, and attacks them. In the first few monster attacks, Kota and Ryoma do their best to defend against all the monster's strikes. However, at one point in their battle, the monster sucker punches Kota in the belly and sends him crashing into a pillar behind Ryoma, knocking him out. Shortly after taking care of Kota, it grabs Ryoma, lifts him, and hurls him toward Ayaka after she tries shooting a useless arrow at it. Soon after knocking all three of them out, the zombie monster roars, and Kota, who wakes up, calls his buddies' names to know if they're doing okay. When he gets no response, he suddenly realizes just how powerless they are against the monster, seeing as their strongest techniques don't even match it. If he doesn't think of a good strategy soon, then all three of them will be killed eventually. By the time the others wake up, Kota suddenly gets an idea to try out a particular attack style that requires 3 people to complete. With no other options or time left, Kota calls his buddies and tells them that their only chance at defeating the monster is through a burst attack. As Ryoma teases Kota for hiding such a powerful technique from them the entire time, Ayaka asks Kota to explain what kind of technique the burst attack is, and Kota begins by telling his buddies that the burst attack is a nickname given by gamers, not an actual technique. As it turns out, back when EOS was still a game, it had a bug that only happened when 3 people attacked at exactly the same time. Once the condition is met, it's said that a glitch occurs that generates a damage bonus dozens of times, which gamers named the burst attack. However, Kota explains that the technique is high risk and has caused several cases of freezing and data crashes if it fails, meaning that if this technique fails in the real world, then all 3 of them might die or face something more terrifying. That being said, Ayaka asks if there's another approach they can take rather than bet on the slim possibility that they succeed. And Kota not only tells her that there's not, but he also adds that if there's even a fraction of a second's error in the 3-person simultaneous attack, then they're cooked. While he's heard that veteran players have had a success rate of below 5%, Kota admits that he's never really tried using that technique because he didn't have any teammates to try it with, which is sad in itself. Around this time, Ryoma and Ayaka notice Kota looking dejected for fighting alone in the game, and so, to cheer him up, Ryoma and Ayaka both thank him for helping them survive that far, and encourage him to trust them to have his back as his, in real-life teammates, adding that their teamwork won't lose to pro gamers. After a quick huddle cheer with his buddies, Kota finally gets back his fighting spirit. so he thanks both Ryoma and Ayaka for cheering him up and urges them to do the burst attack together. With the stage set, Kota and both his buddies hide somewhere close to the monster and wait for Kota's signal to strike. Once all three are set and ready to go, Kota gives the order for all of them to get a move on. And, almost instantly, the three of them lunge at the monster from opposite directions and launch the burst attack on the monster. As soon as all three of them manage to land the simultaneous hit on the monster, a huge explosion ensues and almost destroys the entire stage for the second quest. Seconds after the explosion happens, Kota realizes that he's stripped the monster's chest armor away, and so he proceeds to cut off the monster's neck to kill it completely. Unfortunately for him, before he even gets within an inch of the monster's neck, the angry zombie monster grabs his sword with its bare hands and locks him in an immobile position. At this point, Kota, who suddenly notices the immense power this crazy zombie still has, realizes that his stamina won't last in the position he's in. However, just as our loser gamer MC is about to give up, Ryoma and Ayaka appear behind him to encourage and back him up, so he can deliver the final blow with their support. Upon getting reminded that he's not alone in this game anymore, Kota gets that much needed courage to refuse death and losing in such a situation. With his plot armor increased by his colleagues yapping, Kota eventually slices the monster's fingers, freeing himself from the monster's lock hold, and ultimately cuts the bastard's head off with his upgraded sword. Soon after, killing off the humongous zombie monster, a key card appears from its carcass. But while Kota just stands there in place, exhausted, Ayaka and Ryoma ignore him and focus all their attention on the key card that just appeared, unsure of whether or not they just defeated the monster. Before long, Ayaka turns to Kota to tell him the good news, but just then, Kota loses consciousness and collapses, leaving both his friends rushing over and trying to wake him up before nightfall. Several hours later, Kota wakes up in a strange room, confused, and suddenly remembers that he was just fighting Hammer Crusher moments ago. When he jerks up, asking anybody around where and what's happened to Hammer Crusher, Ayaka and Ryoma, who are nearby at the dining table making breakfast, realize that he's awake, so they greet him and ask about his health. By the time Ayaka moves close enough to Kota, he asks her to explain where they are, and Ayaka assures him that they're in the safe room. Apparently, after Kota collapsed from stamina depletion, Ayaka and Ryoma impressively picked up the key card that Hammer Crusher dropped, and got to the current safe room they're in before nightfall. Upon hearing the full gist of all that's happened while he was out, Kota gets sad and begins yapping about how his reckless strategy put them both in danger many times. Turns out, Bro thought he was trying to do something to better his tactics, but, in the long run, he ran out of stamina and collapsed. To cheer the loner bozo up, both Ayaka and Ryoma hug and let him know that he should learn to trust them more. After seeing all he's done to help them survive this far, Ayaka urges Kota to stop trying to shoulder everything alone, and instead, trust them to be his comrades. Following this, Ryoma also yaps about his mistakes and cockiness, and corroborates Ayaka's point about considering them as comrades. Kota finally decides to trust both of them as his comrades. That being said, he adds a few more corny lines of encouragement and ends all the gloomy talk so they can eat and begin their day. Over breakfast, Ayaka comments on the amazing attack power the burst attack had, and suggests they continue relying on the technique in tough situations. On the contrary, Kota advises that they shouldn't rely on the burst attack anymore, because it's a desperate cheat technique that'll end up getting them killed. As such, he suggests they use this safe house as their base, just like they'd planned for the first one, and level up properly before heading to the next quest. Also, since they've defeated the Hammer Crusher, Kota assures his teammates that there won't be enemies stronger than that appearing anytime soon. In his mind, though, Kota remains certain that threats other than zombies shouldn't exist in this game world, if the world is the same as the game world. Hours later, by nightfall, a small group of 3 human stragglers runs into a larger group of assholes. At first, the small group camps together and tries to reason with the larger group of assholes, citing that they're humans just like them. But unfortunately, before they even get a chance to defend themselves, the larger group douses all 3 of them in gasoline and lights them all on fire, claiming that they intend to use the fire to warm themselves up. As the trio gets burned in the flames, the assholes drink and enjoy the smell of singing human flesh. Along the line, one of the idiots praises the world where might makes right, and others claim that the city is theirs now since there's no police to catch them. Soon after burning those poor guys up, the leader of the gang tells his crew to get themselves ready to hunt down and burn every last human survivor when dawn breaks. The following morning, Kota and his buddies head out to the ruins to continue fighting the slower zombies, so they can level up much faster and easily. After spending several hours fighting and killing off as many zombies as they can, when they can, even Ryoma, the muscle head, levels up pretty nicely. At this point, Kota commends everyone for doing a great great job and decides to call it a day, so they can return to the safe room in time before nightfall. Around this time, Ryoma suggests that since they've leveled up and gotten stronger, they might as well take on night zombies. Who knows, they just might find out how weak those zombies are. While it's true that, at their current level, they might win in a one-on-one fight, Kota urges Ryoma not to forget that the zombies all attack in groups, meaning they'll be at a disadvantage if they get cocky way too early. Understanding Kota's point, Ryoma gets obedient and tells Ayaka, who's glad to see him grown up, to obediently return to the safe room. The following day, as the trio continues exploring the city's ruins, Ayaka makes some offhanded comments about the world they're trapped in, which is inside a game. Not too long after, Ryoma notices a body hidden in a corner near their pathway and tells his buddies that he's discovered someone collapsed near them. When the other two join him to check the body out, they realize that the person's been dead for days now, and wonder if the poor guy was killed by the zombies. Since slow, ordinary zombies are sufficient threats for a human who hasn't awakened yet, Kota concludes that the guy must have been killed by a horde. However, as they continue examining the body, Kota suddenly spots a kitchen knife tucked in the back of the guy's pants and calls their attention to it. By this time, Ryoma asks Kota if zombies use kitchen knives as their murder tools, and Kota assures him that zombies that use weapons don't appear in the game, which brings them to the million-dollar question 3 of them have been too scared to ask. Does this mean that the guy was killed by a human? At first, Kota refuses to believe that's the case, because he knows that player killers don't exist in the EOZ game. When Ryoma asks for a better explanation of what player killers mean, Kota does a demonstration by punching Ryoma in the face, which hurts the Nimrod like hell, and then explains to both of them that Ryoma's HP shouldn't decrease after hitting his head. To his dismay, Ryoma's HP suddenly starts decreasing, and this gets Kota even more scared of his worst fears becoming reality. While Ryoma scolds him for hitting him in a way that makes him hurt, Kota wonders why this in real-life game world doesn't have specifications that prevent players from damaging each other. Considering everything he knows about the game, hitting Ryoma shouldn't hurt him at all. So, if he's getting hurt, does this mean that humans can become their enemies, too? Around this same time, Ryoma reminds Kota that he was in deep pain when Hayato hit him back in the first safe house, and Kota suddenly realizes that Ryoma is right. He just didn't notice the pain because he was too afraid to even think about it. With all the evidence they've gathered so far, Ayaka asks if he's now certain that the murder really did happen, and Kota, hesitant to believe this to be the truth, advises they return to the safe room quickly before it's too late. Later that night, before going to bed, Kota calls his colleagues for a meeting and advises that they organize the situation for now. Given the fact that the mid-level boss's appearance at the second quest stage was just as weird as this murder, Kota concludes that developments different from the game he knows may be starting to occur. Just as he's about to continue explaining, however, a walkie-talkie radio on the shelf behind them beams to life with what sounds like a distress call coming from another group of human survivors. Without hesitating, Kota rushes toward the radio after recognizing the call as an emergency transmission from another safe room, and activates the listening feature so they can all hear what the other person has to say. Judging by the sound of the voice on the other end, Ayaka recognizes the person calling to be Eri, a blonde classmate who stayed behind with Hayato, and so she does her best to speak to her, just so she can figure out what the hell's happening to all of them back there. The moment Eri realizes that Ayaka's the one talking, she asks her to come help them because there are dangerous guys with weapons attacking them for no reason. Before long, one of the dangerous guys gets to Eri and ends her life, leaving the line static for a second before it cuts off automatically. After trying and failing several times to recover the connection with Eri, Ayaka and Ryoma turns to Kota for answers and ways they can respond to what just happened. But by that time, Kota just stays frozen in shock, as he just realized that his worst fears have manifested in real life. EO's world therein is very different from the game one he's used to. As he struggles to wrap his head around this new game development, wondering what the hell's happening to this world, Ayaka lets the boys know that they have to go save Eri and the others. When Ryoma warns her about the dangers of the night zombies, seeing as it's almost nighttime, Ayaka tells him that she just can't let her classmates die like that, even if going to rescue them is very dangerous. By the time Kota regains his senses, he tells Ryoma and Ayaka that they're going to leave their comfort zone and rescue them because the radio signal came from the previous safe room. If they hurry up, they can still make it in before something really bad happens. Before deciding to follow him, however, Ayaka asks Kota if it's okay for them to risk their lives for these assholes, and Kota tells her that he's just being a good friend to them, nothing else. That being said, Kota hurries both his buddies up, and so Ryoma and Ayaka hit the streets after thanking him for being very reliable. About 30 minutes later, when they get to the location of the first safe room, Kota and his buddies hide out of sight for a few minutes and observe the surroundings to avoid alerting the overly sensitive night zombies, who are somehow more susceptible to sounds. Once they realize that the entrance door to the first safe room is slightly open, Ayaka leads the boys toward the room, opens the door wider, and calls Eri's name, hoping to get a response from her so they can save everyone. At first, when the trio notices the dark state of the room, they give up, thinking that it's already too late for them to save their friends. However, not too long after they arrive, Eri and the other scrawny blonde dude, who used to follow her around, recognize Ayaka's voice and reveal their hiding spot. Having seen Eri and the other dude safe, Ayaka heaves a sigh of relief as the four-eyed blonde Eri follower thanks them genuinely for coming to help them. When Kota asks about Hayato and the others, Eri narrates everything that happened during the invasion. Apparently, the foolish guy, Hayato, opened the door pretty willingly to some random strangers, and then acted all scared and surprised when the armed dudes confronted them. Soon after, seeing all the food and supplies Hayato and his team had in stock, the armed men became annoyingly more violent. During the confrontation, Hayato asks the armed dudes why they're attacking his group when they're all human, but instead of giving Hayato a human response, the crazy bastard slams him on the ground and bashes his head with a rusty baseball bat. In summary, Eri tells Kota that they allowed an armed group of over 10 people to invade the safe room and had all their food stolen from them, while she and Four Eyes managed to hide and survive. Hayato and everyone else were captured and taken away by them. Having heard everything, Eri just said, Kota figures that this attack by armed humans wasn't a development in the game at all. If anything, Ayaka thinks it's almost as if those dangerous people are also humans who were transported to that world, just like them. As the others try to figure out who those dangerous attackers were, Four Eyes suddenly remembers something and tells the group that he suspects that those guys are definitely senior students from their school who had rumors of causing violent incidents. If that's true, then Ryoma knows that they're going to be a bigger hassle to deal with than the zombies. Hearing this, Kota asks Four Eyes if he knows where they went, and he tells them that he overheard them talking about getting to a supermarket. Upon realizing that the supermarket isn't that far from there, Kota considers getting there and saving the others before nightfall. But, before they leave for the supermarket, Ryoma scolds Eri and Four Eyes, calling them idiots for taking the safe room from them and then letting external enemies invade them easily. While Ayaka urges him to forget about that past incident already, Kota, on the other hand, thinks about the recent turn of events, the mid-level boss appearing at an early stage, and now the thugs attacking other humans, and ultimately accepts the fact that his game knowledge is no longer applicable to this game world. In other words, he isn't going to use the same strategies he used in the game ever again, or else they won't last very long. Just then, Four Eyes touches Kota on the back and asks him if he's at least going to try to save Hayato and the others, citing that, despite his obnoxious behavior, Hayato is still a friend. Before Kota can respond, Ryoma tells the glasses guy that even if he'd like to help them out, they still don't know how. By this time, Kota gets a bright idea and tells his buddies that he knows a way they can rescue everyone without bloodshed, since they have only till sunset before the zombie arrives. Kota tells his buddies that they must rescue everyone and return before nightfall. After listening to Ayaka mutter some words of encouragement to prevent Hayato and Kota from fighting again, Ryoma urges Kota to explain his plan to them on their way to the supermarket, since there's literally no time to waste, and Kota leaves with the other two. Seconds before they head out, however, Eri calls Kota, apologizes for doing terrible things to him previously, and then thanks him for helping them out. Seeing as he also considers everyone important friends, Kota assures them that he's just trying to do what's right, and then leaves the safe room soon after with his buddies. When they get back on the street, running toward the supermarket, Kota asks Ayaka to lend him the weird device thing attached to her backpack, and Ayaka, knowing fully well that it's a security alarm, asks what he plans on doing with it. Once he tells her that he plans on using it to rescue Hayato and the others without fighting, Ayaka talks about how surprising it is for someone like him to take on such a risky rescue plan. In his defense, Kota explains that since the world has already become vastly different from the game he knows, his sure-win methods will no longer work. Also, since he just can't stand still and wait to die, he needs to man up and resolve to jump into danger to carve out his path. With all that said, Ayaka smiles and tells Kota just how cool and reliable he's become these past few days. A few minutes later, Ryoma finds the supermarket they've been searching for and calls his buddies' attention to it. Upon confirming that the supermarket is the real one they're looking for, Kota and the other two spot the armed group loitering and smashing all over the inside section of the supermarket. Just as Kota's about to go over their plan again, one of the goons screams at Hayato for getting cheeky with him, and then threatens to kill him if he doesn't be a good boy. Turns out Hayato's been looking at the guy with insolent eyes, and the guy couldn't stand it anymore. So, as Kota changes their plans to save Hayato and the others instantly, the goon picks up a huge pair of pliers and proceeds to start plucking out Hayato's fingers one by one, so he can become a good boy eventually. Luckily for Hayato, before the goon manages to pull off any of his fingers, an explosion happens in the parking lot and distracts the goons a bit. While Kota and Ayaka rush inside to save the others, Ryoma, who's staying much closer to the explosion, praises Kota for always coming up with amazing strategies and waits for the goons to take the bait. Soon after causing the explosion, Ayaka shoots an enhanced arrow at the explosion site, further spooking the goons inside the supermarket and causes them all to believe that there's something in the parking lot outside. Thinking it might be another one of those tough zombie monsters, the gang leader rallies his men and rushes outside to the parking lot with them, leaving the kids behind to kill off the monsters as soon as possible. As it turns out, the plan was to first make loud noises at the parking lot to draw as many goons outside as possible. Once that's done, then the decoy will attract them and buy time for the other two to infiltrate from the back entrance and rescue everyone without getting noticed by them. Earlier on, before the explosion, Kota volunteered to be the decoy because he knew the map well, but just then, Ryoma opposed Kota's decision and chose to be the decoy instead, not just because tag is his specialty, but also because his athletic build and abilities make it much easier for him to outrun the street punks. Now that he's taken on such responsibility, Ryoma subtly regrets being so cocky because the goons easily spot and chase after him for disrupting their peaceful evening, leaving him with no other choice but to play the tough game of tag. In the meantime, Kota and Ayaka, after seeing Ryoma lure the goons to a far enough distance, proceed to sneak into the supermarket from the back entrance. Once they're inside, they spot a goon guard and hurry past the dumbass, who seems to pose no apparent problem to them, to get to Hayato and the others. Right when Hayato and the other two captives complain and give up hope of ever being saved, Kota and Ayaka show up and call them silently, just to let them know that they're there to save them. After seeing both of them, the kids ask them why they're there, and Ayaka says Eri told them everything that happened, and so they came to help. With no time to waste, Kota unties everyone, including Hayato, and urges them all to get to the exit. As the other two captives thank Kota for helping them out, Hayato, ever the pathetic bastard, refuses to accept Kota's pity because it hurts his pride. By this time, Ayaka urges Hayato not to raise his voice, as now isn't the time for that, but unfortunately for them, even after Kota advises that he just do as instructed, Hayato still refuses to accept the fact that he lost to those goons during the invasion, citing that he doesn't need Kota's help whatsoever. Amid all the yapping and fiddling around, Hayato hits a stack of boxes behind himself and accidentally spills over several dozen more boxes, as well as the other metal materials placed on the boxes. Upon hearing such loud sounds coming from the inside, the goons realize that they're being tricked by the kids, and so they instantly return to the supermarket to check up on them. Moments before the goons return, however, Kota urges Hayato to hurry up because he knows that they definitely noticed them from that sound. But sadly for them, the only female captive tells Ayaka and Kota that she can't run because the goons hurt her. To avoid wasting any more time, Kota wraps the girl's arms around his shoulder, instructs Ayaka to cover them, and then tells Hayato to prepare to fight as well, while Hayato continues yapping about them, leaving the dead weight behind, citing that his smart survival skills will help him choose whether he lives or dies. The eerie, loud sound of several night zombies fills the entire room in seconds, causing the foolish oaf to cower in fear and cowardice. At first, Ayaka and Kota struggle to actually wrap their heads around the sound. However, before long, Kota very quickly realizes that the night zombies are coming, and so he hurriedly tells everyone to retreat to the back of the store. Sadly for them, on their way to the back of the store, the goons from earlier show up and block them all from going any further, causing them to become trapped between the horde of night zombies coming for them and the useless goons looking to kill them for fun. After the gang leader runs his foul mouth, threatening never to let any of them get away with trying to save the others, Kota asks the fool why they, as humans, just can't do without hurting each other, especially since the zombies are their common enemy. And the gang leader says they're doing it because it's fun. If anything, the fact that no rules or annoying authorities are binding their shitty lives in that world, the gang leader and his goons let Kota know that they each have no intention of ever returning to the real world. Since everyone's gonna die anyway, he chooses to die rather than live long, surviving. Having heard all the terrible things the leader had to say, Kota curses the bastard for abandoning his humanity. But the leader, who doesn't give a shit, gives their group a chance to choose how they die, through getting eaten by the zombie, or by the very humans they so despise. At this point, Kota puts on a smug look and chooses the third option after flexing on their decision to flee into the supermarket storage room in the first place. To carry out his plan, Kota takes out his sword, jumps high enough to get to the railings and metal storage lockers, and destroys many of those metal casings, so they'll fall on the goons blocking their path. As the fireworks begin, Kota turns to Ayaka to continue the rest of the plan, and Ayaka, after telling everyone else to stay close to her, works with Kota to attack the night zombies to slow them down anyway they can. At one point in their battle against the zombies, Kota gets trapped as one of the zombies wraps its tongue around his sword. Thankfully, before the zombie gets to him, Ryoma shows up in the nick of time and destroys all the zombies flocking around his buddy in one fell swoop. Thereafter, he boasts about his steadily leveled up strength, and Kota, upon thanking him for saving his arse, urges them all to escape now that they have the chance. However, just when Kota and the other kids fight their way to freedom, the gang leader from earlier appears somewhere random, near them, and refuses to let them run away just yet. To help the fools out, Kota advises them to stay quiet in the building, if they still want to live and have fun, because the night zombies are more than they can handle. Unable to listen to reason, the gang leader screams at the top of his voice, telling Kota to shut the hell up, and then forbidding him from ever leaving the supermarket. As the gang leader and his goons charge at the kids, hoping to stop them and refuse their escape. The other night, zombies drop from the ceiling and bite the hell out of the gang leader and the rest of his goons, turning them into zombies almost instantly. By the time the gang leader realizes that he's cooked, even in his dying breath, he refuses to let his existence end in a place like that before killing Kota, the brat who bested him. As such, Bro makes sure to keep his consciousness and memories intact, even after he's turned into a zombie, just to make sure he remembers his new enemy, Kota. About an hour later, Kota and the rest of the survivors finally return to the proposed rendezvous point to rest and catch their breath before moving on to the second safe house. The moment Eri spots the other girl with the injured leg, she hugs her tightly, with tears on her face, and mentions just how glad she is to see her looking safe. While the others pant vigorously, with Ryoma lamenting over how he thought he was gonna die. Four Eyes thanks Kota for saving everyone, and he admits that he's just glad that he could keep his promise somehow. Not too long after, Hayato's lackey, the other guy who was captured, reminds Kota that those punks will definitely come to attack their spot again the following day, if they don't get out of that spot quickly. But just then, Kota tells him that he plans on moving them out of that spot by dawn. Confused, Four Eyes and Eri ask Kota where he's taking them, but rather than spoil the fun, Kota waits till dawn before revealing the location of the second safe room. At sunrise, Kota takes everyone back to the second safe room, which impresses them all, and grants them all access to all the amenities inside the safe room. When Four Eyes brings up the issue of limited food, Kota assures the guy that they won't have to fight for food because they'll leave that spot soon to search for an escape method. At this point, the other ladies, impressed by what Kota just said, praise him for being really reliable, and so they decide to follow his lead henceforth. Around that same time, Hayato's lackey tells Hayato that he's realized that they're the ones who were wrong, and so he feels like they should both cooperate with him. Once Ayaka spots Hayato staying silent, she realizes that something's wrong, so she calls and tries to get him to accept Kota as the leader of the group. Before long, Hayato snaps, telling Ayaka to shut the hell up, and then reveals that he's never going to serve under some lame otaku bastard, because he feels like the leader of the group should be a strong man like him. That being said, the brainless oaf still tries to force the others to accept him as a suitable leader over Kota, claiming that the thug attack was just bad luck and that he didn't do anything wrong. This time around, rather than letting him off the hook, the injured girl reveals the truth about the attack to everyone. It turns out that the thugs invaded the safe room because Hayato forgot to close the entrance door to the safe house, which is just stupid. Hearing this injured girl talk, Hayato tries to bully her into admitting that what she just said is a lie, but the girl refuses to budge, claiming that the bozo still doesn't understand how dangerous the game world currently is, despite having gone through so many near-death experiences. Realizing that his intimidation tactic has failed, Hayato gets seriously pissed to the point where he raises his fist to punch the useless dead weight, who's only good at talking. Thankfully, this time around, before the idiot does any harm to the poor lady, Eri and Four Eyes step up and lock the powerless Nimrod's fist in place. Before Hayato can even process what's happening, Four Eyes and Eri urge him to just give up all that nonsense because nobody will listen to his stupid discussions anymore. Around this time, Hayato turns back, calls everyone idiots, and proceeds to leave the alliance that he calls the sinking ship. Just as he's about to leave, however, the injured girl calls him, and Hayato excitedly turns, hoping she'll yap about how she needs him, but when the girl only tells him to ensure he closes the door this time, he scoffs at the embarrassment and storms out of the building. Shortly after watching the idiot leave, Kota moves on to explain to the others that there are only two types of creatures, the humans and the zombies, and since they're all humans, he assures them that he doesn't believe in this hierarchy BS, which means that they're to work together and escape from the dangerous world as soon as possible. Upon hearing his explanation, Eri asks Kota to teach them all how to fight, promising that they'll entrust their lives in their hands, and Kota not only agrees to teach them, but he also instantly decides to start the lessons right away. If they're quick enough, then he's pretty confident that he'll be able to drill all his knowledge into all of them in 2 days. As such, for the next 2 days, Kota gets the rest of his colleagues registered as players and lectures them on all the various items that can be found everywhere in the zombie game world, including teaching them how to manipulate the materials so they can become powerful weapons. At the end of their 2-day training lesson, Four Eyes and his colleagues find out about the first aid kit station that those punks use to survive their injuries. Although knowing how to use first aid is essential, Kota does let them know that weapons are the most essential materials they need when it comes to fighting zombies. To practicalize everything they've learned so far, Kota takes them to a spot filled with zombies, instructs them to take out the weapons they got from the awakening, which they do, and gives them the signal to take down the slower zombies when they can. As the cadets fight and crush the zombies, Kota continues lecturing them about the zombies' weak point, which is the head, how easily they can defeat them, and also their weakened vision and smell. Once all his students are done taking down the small horde, Kota tells them the various ways to catch the zombies off guard, not forgetting to mention just how important teamwork actually is. Before long, Eri and the other 3 level up, just like Kota told them earlier, and end their final training session after thanking Kota for all the help. Soon after, granting Eri the responsibility to protect the safe room, Kota and his buddies move on to continue searching for a way to escape the game world. That being said, both groups split up and head their different ways after bidding each other farewell. On their way to the next quest, Ayaka says something about them being reliable all at once. But then Kota asks if she's cool with leaving her friends just like that, and Ayaka tells him she's cool because she doesn't need to worry about them anymore. If anything, she's more worried about Kota going astray and would gladly choose to stay by his side, so she can watch over him. Having said all that, Ryoma pats Kota on the head, calling him a baby, and Kota reminds the guy of how he used to be the lonely crybaby back when they were younger. Upon remembering how little bro used to cry every time asking for her and Kota, Ayaka reminds everyone of the memories and catches a good laugh as they continue their walk. Later that evening, the zombified gang leader, who still has his consciousness and intelligence, leaps from building to building with his zombified goons, smelling the air and tracking Kota and his buddies down till he finds and kills them with his bare hands. Meanwhile, Kota and his buddies finally arrive at the location for the 3rd quest, which happens to have a green-like, almost toxic atmosphere, which they all instantly notice. According to Kota's analysis, the map is identical to the game's content, and therefore the boss room should be located a few meters in front. With that said, Ryoma tells his buddies that this quest might be their easiest one yet, because there aren't any traps in sight. Even still, Ayaka calls him back from Wonderland to let him know that things Kota doesn't anticipate can still happen ahead, so they should be very careful. Right after agreeing with Ayaka's suggestion, Kota urges his colleagues to proceed carefully without letting their guard down, and so they all get a move on. Upon defeating a few zombies along the way, Kota and his buddies finally make it to the boss room. There, they find an abominable creature with one large head-like structure for its upper torso and humanoid legs for the lower one. Appalled by the grotesque nature of this weird monster, Ayaka asks Kota how he plans on defeating it, and Kota begins his explanation by telling them that the monster's tentacles are the troublesome parts because they attack blind spots. As such, if they're to fight it, then all 3 of them must cooperate and fight while covering all directions, meaning they must always cover each other's backs. Soon after passing the message across, Kota gives the signal to approach the monster, and almost instantly, Ayaka and Ryoma push the monster with their leader. The moment the monster spots them coming, it releases its tentacles and tries to attack them from their blind spots. However, when it notices just how coordinated the trio is, seeing as they defend all its blind spot attacks, it switches to full-on offensive and captures Ryoma in its tentacles. Seeing her partner in trouble, Ayaka naturally rushes to help him out, but unfortunately, before long, the monster also captures her in its tentacles. Luckily for them, before the monster squeezes them to death, Kota swoops in and cuts off all the tentacles holding his buddies down. Before they begin round 2, Ryoma asks Kota if they're going to be able to defend against these incessant attacks. But Kota assures him that now that the monster's gone all out on them, it has to rest for 30 whole seconds to cool down and regain its lost stamina. As such, while it rests, Kota instructs his people to hit the monster with their strongest technique, so they can deal the most damage yet. and, without any hesitation, all three fighters strike the monster with strong consecutive attacks as Kota silently counts the 30-second cooldown period. Once he's done counting the full 30 seconds, he tells his buddies to retreat for now and prepare for the counterattack. As they retreat, Ryoma, who's shocked, asks Kota how he's able to count the full 30 seconds in a situation like that. And Kota says it's because he's fought this same battle thousands of times in the game, meaning the choreographed movement is already carved into his body. After surviving the monster's counterattack, Kota and his buddies unleash one final attack that knocks down the monster one more time. This time around, Ryoma suggests they quickly finish the monster off in one go, but then Kota tells him to stop and wait to observe what makes this useless boss monster very troublesome. Turns out that whenever it's slightly incapacitated, it pretends to be down, and then unleashes a powerful counterattack to kill the noobs fighting it. On the other hand, if one can see through the trick, then when it emerges next, it inadvertently exposes its weak point, giving them a chance to deal massive damage to it. However, just as Kota and his buddies wait for the monster to get back up and morph into its final form, the zombified gang leader and his goons arrive at their spot, breathing heavily and angrily. When Ayaka spots them coming from beneath the platform they're currently on, she recognizes them instantly as the thugs from the supermarket and informs the boys about it. At first, Ryoma screams at them, thinking they were still normal humans, and tells them to turn back if they don't want to die wasting the lives they saved on pointless revenge. However, once Kota gets a closer look at the thugs, he notices the familiar zombie demeanor from them, and almost freezes in shock when he spots the zombified gang leader lunging at him to kill him. Seconds before the gang leader gets to him, Kota finally realizes that the thugs have turned to zombies, so he goes on the defensive and avoids getting bitten by the gang leader. While Ryoma struggles to keep them at bay, he complains to Kota that they were humans just recently. But just then, Ayaka, who's equally as confused, asks Kota, while defending against one of the goons, to explain what's going on. Apparently, the game doesn't have a complex system where humans turn into zombies, because it's just a simple game where one aims for the goal while defeating zombies that stand in one's way. As Kota continues yapping and fighting, the third quest's boss suddenly gets up from its slumber and morphs into its final form. Talk about terrible timing. By the time the trio spot the monster getting back up, Ryoma curses it and asks Kota for their next move. With no other place left to run, Kota tells his buddies that they have no other option but to stand and fight both enemies simultaneously. Before the chaos begins, however, Ryoma tells Kota that he's never heard about humans turning into zombies, and although Kota concurs with him, he does assure his buddies that there's no other way for them to survive this battle than to fight. At this point, Ryoma suggests that they use the burst attack technique, but Kota tells him that the technique is not useful in their situation. To properly fight this battle, he suggests they split into two groups. Ayaka and Ryoma will take care of the boss by thoroughly attacking its weak point, while he defeats the thugs. With the stage set, Ayaka and Ryoma return to fight the monster, while Kota stays back and fights the zombified thugs. Irrespective of whether they used to be humans until recently, Kota swears to escape from that spot with his companions, cutting down anything that gets in the way. That being said, he lunges at the small fries first and cuts them up like clockwork. While he's at it, Kota expresses his shock when he realizes that the zombies still have the intelligence to use weapons, almost as if they awakened as zombies or something. As one of the monsters slams his axe on his sword, Kota is still disturbed in his mind, thinking about some other stupid thing, like egos and whatnot. Eventually, he realizes he's losing focus, thinking about unimportant shit, and instantly does more fighting and less thinking. Seconds later, some of the goon zombies perform a motion he's never seen before, which he notices, but since their movements are somehow too monotonous, he figures he can handle their attacks with improvisation. With that, he baits the zombies to come at him one more time, so he can cut them down easily, and the zombie gang leader takes the bait. Once the gang leader gets close enough, he unleashes a devastating final attack that destroys the gang leader and the rest of his surviving goons, eradicating them from the game world. Soon after defeating the thugs, Kota looks back to check up on his buddies and make sure they're safe. Thankfully, around that time, Ayaka and Ryoma successfully take down the monster boss of the third quest. Right after destroying the monster, Ayaka turns and asks Kota if he's hurt, with Ryoma boasting about how he took that squishy monster down, and Kota, happy to see his buddies alive, praises them for taking down such a difficult monster boss. In response to his praises, Ryoma says they were just following his teachings, but now that they've completed the third quest, the trio anticipates the type of safe room they get next. Upon obtaining the key card and unlocking the third safe room, Kota and his buddies marvel over how spacious and luxurious the room is. To explain the situation, Kota tells the others that safe rooms upgrade according to quest difficulty, meaning that their next few quests will get progressively harder than the last. That being said, Kota checks a holographic map on the safe room wall and realizes that this safe room doesn't have what he's after either. When Ayaka notices him checking the walls, she asks him what he's searching for, and he tells her that he was looking for useful, new information about the world's new elements that weren't in the original game. At that point, Ryoma asks Kota about those zombified punks from before, but before he replies, Ryoma asks him again if he thinks they're also going to turn into zombies. Given the fact that they've survived many intense battles and are fine, Kota reveals that there are still some zombification conditions specific to the game. However, in his mind, he knows that they got lucky that day, because the zombified humans were thugs who were all easy to dispatch. If, peradventure, the next zombified humans they fight turn out to be those close to them, Kota isn't sure what he'll be forced to do when that time comes. Elsewhere, Hayato, the red-headed dumbass, is seen running away from a horde of zombies at some random spot in the city, complaining all the way through, and blaming Kota for stealing his status and leaving him out to dry. As he continues yapping and cursing Kota under his breath, Bro gets distracted and soon loses his footing when he gets to a building ledge. Upon struggling and failing to regain his footing, the brainless oaf falls into the pool beneath the building, luckily for him, and swims out to safety. As he observes the place, hoping to find any signs of life or companionship, Hayato suddenly spots a weird shrine-like stone, glowing red, along with a demonic-looking sword stuck inside it. Although confused at first, the idiot inches much closer to the sword, hoping to figure out what it's all about. Eventually, when he gets close enough, the demon living inside the sword opens its eyes and possesses him with its purple miasma. Thereafter, Hayato mistakes this scenario for the awakening Kota was yapping about earlier, so he latches onto the sword with his bare hands and pulls it out, all while taking in the amazing feeling he's having. Having retrieved the demonic sword, the proud fool slowly changes into a demon as he continues making threats to take everything Kota holds dear the next time they meet. 3 days later, Kota and his two buddies return to the streets of the ruined city and spend several hours killing zombies and leveling up as much as they can. At one point in their workout, Ryoma, upon taking down a few zombies and leveling up, suggests to Kota that since they've been grinding for 3 days, they might as well challenge the next boss monster. Even though Kota knows he's right, he does let Ryoma know that they can't progress to the next stage if they don't find the green card, which is usually around the spot they're at. As they continue extending their search, hoping to find the key, Kota comes across a weird building that makes him stop and question exactly what it is. When Ayaka stops to look at the same building that's making Kota so puzzled, she gets a bit confused and tells him it's just a normal church. Even still, Kota knows there's something suspicious about the building because he's never seen a church in the EOZ game before. Before long, Ryoma suggests they check it out to see if they can find the green card inside, and both Kota and Ayaka follow him in. Inside, they scan the space for a few seconds and soon realize that there are neither zombies nor items inside the main church. Just when Kota's about to let his guard down, blaming his imagination, they all find the last unexplored room at the back of the church and walk into it. Not too long after, Kota and his buddies gasp in shock when they spot a pink-colored totem with the same sword Hayato stole stuck in it, buried inside some experimental glass capsule. As they move closer to it, Ayaka notices how different it is from the one they touched back at the subway station, and so she asks Kota if he can tell what it is. After Kota talks about not seeing such weird totems in the game, Ryoma, on the other hand, touches it and realizes that it's not even reacting at all. As he continues exploring the capsule, Ryoma spots a small sticker on it with the name Professor Noah written on it and tells Kota about it. The second Kota hears that name, he pushes Ryoma out of the way, checks the sticker to confirm the name, and then tells the other two that Noah is the sole designer and creator of the game they're currently stuck in. While Ayaka and Ryoma don't really see the big deal in finding out the game's creator, Kota tries to get them to realize just how weird it is for a game creator to leave their signature inside the game. At first, Ryoma suggests that maybe they're just an attention seeker, but then Kota figures that the name might be there as an Easter egg. At this point, Ayaka asks him what an Easter egg is, and Kota spends the next few seconds giving her the dictionary meaning of what an Easter egg is. Thereafter, he tells his friends that he thinks that the totem is part of an Easter egg planted by Professor Noah, and might explain whether or not all the anomalies that have happened so far were pre-programmed in advance. If that's the case, then this must mean that there's a chance that Noah is involved in every messed up thing that's happened since they were transported here. By this time, before Kota loses his mind from overthinking, his buddies intervene and decide to take him back to the safe room, so his head doesn't explode. On their way back to the safe room, Kota promises to figure out all he can about that weird church sooner. About an hour later, as the trio returns to the safe room, they suddenly hear the loud groans of zombies nearby, coupled with the distinctive sounds of a particular weapon being used by another fighter. While Ayaka and Ryoma suggest helping the person in need, Kota, who recognizes the distinctive sound all too well, decides to go check it out alone, so the other two can go on ahead. With the sun about to set, Ryoma tries talking him out of risking his life, but Kota promises to catch up quickly, since his speed stat is high. That being said, he climbs up a building, toward the source of the sound, and eventually finds a pink-haired, busty girl fighting zombies with her awakened mace weapon, which Kota knows is almost impossible to get in the EOZ game world. As he continues soliloquying, the girl fighting gets trapped and surrounded by an endless horde of zombies. Luckily for her, just as she's about to get trampled by one of the zombies, Kota swoops in, slices the zombie attacking her from behind in half, and grabs her hand. While the girl continues asking him stupid questions, seeing as she didn't know him, Kota leads her toward what she calls a dead end, and jumps into the sewer water below the platform they're on. After losing the zombies and surviving the fall, he leads her out of there and pulls her to safety. Thereafter, the lady, who thinks he's amazing, asks him how he knew a route like that. Before Kota responds, however, she urges him to let go of her hand, so she can dry herself, and Kota frantically lets go of her hand. Around that time, he realizes just how impossible it is for him to get back to his safe room from that path, and so the girl suggests that he come to their safe room to chill with them. Surprised, Kota asks what she knows about safe rooms, and the girl begins by introducing herself as Kaidi, a 23-year-old office worker who loves playing games. Before Kota can even say a thing, she lets him know that she wants to introduce him to her party, and Kota, left with nowhere to go, agrees to follow her. Moments later, when they get to her party's safe room, Kaidi introduces Kota as the dude who saved her from a dangerous situation, and urges her big brother to let him stay the night as a gesture of appreciation for saving her life. Before letting Kota stay, Kaidi's big brother recounts Kota's story about him and his buddies being transported to that world along with his whole university campus, and then adds that Kota's isekai event happened exactly 2 weeks after they were transported there. By this time, Kota asks if they're also like him, and the big brother, right after introducing himself as Eiji, moves on to tell him that he, his sister, Kaidi, and her friend, Riri, were enveloped by a mysterious light, just like he was, and somehow ended up trapped in that world. At this point, Kota takes a minute to digest these recent developments he's discovering. Before long, Eiji moves on to tell Kota that the three of them were only able to survive this long because they noticed that the world is very similar to a certain game. Hearing this, Kota expresses his surprise to see someone else who knows about EOZ in that world, and almost instantly, Kaidi snaps in excitement as she tells Kota that she, her brother, and Riri used to be obsessed with the game for a while Eiji claims to have been dragged into playing the game by Kaede. Against his will, he reveals that, despite initially thinking games were pointless, he's still very grateful that Kota, being a fellow EOZ player, saved his sister. By this time, Kaidi opens her mouth and starts yapping about some manhwa alternate reality stuff, where the chosen ones, which, in this case, are EOZ players, get sucked into the game world. However, Kota tells her he's the only survivor at the university who knew EOZ, and she instantly gets bored, murmuring inconceivable nonsense like a child. Eventually, when she gets over the disappointment, Kaede calls meeting Kota a miracle, and continues yapping about the importance of EOZ knowledge in surviving that crazed world. Seconds later, she suggests letting Kota and his companions join them, so they can aim to escape the world together. But then Kota tells her that he and his companions couldn't find the green card they've been searching for. Hearing this, Kaede takes out the green card Kota claims he's been searching for, and tells him to use the safe room's radio to call his companions so he can inform them of his location. If anything, she feels that if they can all challenge the fourth boss monster together, then there's no telling how much stronger they'll grow. Right after thinking about the endless possibilities that can occur with Kaede holding the green card, Kota concludes he has no other way to progress but to agree to join her. As such, he makes their alliance official by accepting Kaede's offer, and Kaede, upon consulting with her quiet friend, reveals to Kota that Riri also thinks he's cool and strong enough to join them. After a brief silence, Eiji, who's also cool with the alliance, demands that Kota surrender all his weapons, if he's intending on staying at the safe room for the night. When Kaede calls out her big brother for being rude, with Kota restating his intentions as pure, Eiji explains that while he does know that the game has no merit for humans fighting each other, the fact that Kota's a living human being makes him susceptible to committing foolish acts on a whim. Because of this, Eiji just wants to be on the safer side for the night, and that's not a bad thing. Having realized Eiji's intentions, Kota agrees with his sentiment and decides to surrender his weapon. With that settled, Eiji dismisses them all after promising to meet up with Kota's companions the next day to challenge the next quest. A few minutes later, as Kaede and Kota do the dishes, Kaede apologizes to Kota for her brother's uptight behavior earlier, citing that she invited him to play EOZ to get him to loosen up a bit, and Kota assures her that he knows Eiji was just being very cautious, which isn't a problem. That being said, Kaede moves on to talk about Kota as a person, whom she finds interesting. All because since she's been discussing with him, he seems like a normal, quiet kid, unlike back when he was fighting the zombies and had different eyes. Embarrassed, Kota apologizes for being two-faced and tells her that he got so desperate to save her back then that he lost control of himself. Plus, given how eager he is to escape from that spot with his companions, Kota says he'd sworn to do anything to protect them. Around this time, Kaede teases Kota, insinuating that his companion might be his girlfriend, but Kota, who's now super embarrassed, tells her that Ayaka and Ryoma are just his childhood friends, nothing more. Even still, Kaede moves dangerously close to him and continues teasing him, hoping he'll somehow look at her in a more romantic light. When Kota chickens out under the pressure, she chuckles, apologizes for being too pushy, and lets him know that she can protect herself just fine. Just then, Eiji creeps into the kitchen and scolds his little sister for troubling Kota when he has a big boss battle scheduled for the next day. Realizing that he might be right, Kaede handles the rest while Kota goes to rest. Upon leaving the kitchen, Kota radios Ayaka and Ryoma to tell them all that's happened in the last few hours. Although happy to see him doing fine, they scold him for not contacting them sooner, and Kota apologizes for all that. With that, he tells them about their meetup scheduled for the next day, and assures them, after giving them several reasons, that they can trust Kaede and her big brother. Despite knowing that he can trust them, he still fears that there might be casualties if their teamwork breaks down in the face of this next unprecedented massive enemy.